Hey, time for another DraftScience video presentation. I better make sure it's recording. I believe so. 7 seconds already. Whoa, better get going. Way behind. Alright, Stephen Bro. I don't know what's in these videos, but, no, just devoting a channel to debunking me rather than actually talking about the subject. And the debunks are like so meaningless and useless. So, it is true that I was under the assumption that the node size, so you probably shouldn't even call them nodes. I don't know what the right word for it would be. Okay, oh, great chalk. Alright, so this is a way I think you need to look at the experiment, is this way anyway. So Stephen overtly says that the number 2 proposition I've made is overtly wrong. Somehow that the math isn't predicting a location on a curved line. And then he shows a brilliant simulation that does exactly that, puts the thing on a simulation. So even though he thinks this is a bad idea, it's not true. He shows a simulation that does exactly that and calls it brilliant. Even though it's labeled double slit and it's really only the single impediment experiment. Alright, well anyway, so that's part of the context of this discussion. So in all the videos I've watched over the my whole life actually, nobody's really talked about the node size, how big, okay, they always talk about the central maxima because it ends up being a double in the single slit, okay, so you end up with this double size, alright, compared to the other things, right, so that they'll talk about, but they've never really talked about the fact that this pattern changes as you move from here to down here, okay, and the fact is that the nodes, this size, rather dramatically changes. So if you have lots of nodes, it's just changing a little bit, but it gets gigantic down here, and that would explain this is the irony part, right? That would explain why we don't see these nodes. So one of the reasons why the pattern fades out is probably due to the fact that a contributing factor, let's call it, is the fact that even if there were photons that were going there, they're spread so thin that they don't produce a visible pattern. So, that's sort of a strange irony that they never really talked about it when it's rather significant. I drew these getting smaller, didn't I? They get bigger and bigger and bigger. But they get bigger on a funny curve, okay, so they get just a little bit bigger, and then once they get up here, they get a lot bigger, okay, but they really don't go anywhere else, so you just stop here. Because the truth is, this experiment really has to be understood in segments, because the key to it is the length of one of the lines has to stay the same. So when you're doing your math, you're basically saying a length of this line, this is the L for this line. So you have an opening. The two slits have a separation. They're not on the same focus. They're not in the same place. So there's no way to have both of them have a zero angle. The zero angle for this one, the 90 degrees for this one, is not the same place that the 90 degrees for this one is. Kind of obviously they're separated. So you have to take that into account in understanding that this line, you're going to make this one stay L distance. Alright, so it always stays at L. And this line, you're going to say how much longer does it get. And as you start to visualize that, you can start to see what I'm talking about. Now this fact that these things got bigger was always kind of apparent, but it was just never talked about. Because in the wave example, you can really see it. They really do get big. Now I always sort of just said that's because they're doing the flat screen thing. So the flat screen makes everything look, as you go out, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So that's how I interpreted it. But it's just a fact of the wave mechanics, or the angle mechanics, is that the change is small here, and the change, you can almost see it as a reflection on another line. They're exactly inverted. And the same is true in here. In here, any tiny little distance creates a huge change. Okay, so you go on, so there are actually rings in here. So if you could look inside here, okay, it is a bunch of bars in there. Alright, so only this little tiny center is actually an on, and then there's an off net, and then an on, and an off, then an on, and an off. Alright, anyway, but that's just not important. But anyway, so I obviously, okay, because I thought they were the same size, I was saying, well, once I know what this one is, I can just calculate all the rest. But you can't do that unless you know by what percentage they increase, you know, what the angular change is. And I'm saying that's probably a number. You know, I just haven't been able to, you know, I'm not a math whiz, so I have to figure out how to calculate that number. But there's probably a ratio of 1.6 that you can derive once you know how many wavelengths are in here. But the truth is the number of wavelengths in here definitely decide this location. Okay, at 90 degrees, right? You got a path length difference that's going to be exactly the opening of the slit at this 0 or 90, however you want to look at it. Probably should be looked at this way because it is an angle thing. Alright, so but where this first maxima is, again, this is another subject that, you know, if I was to enlarge this a little bit here, you know, that slit, you could sort of understand that this and this distance goes straight up to this middle, and that the fact is that on that arc, that middle is just a tiny, tiny percentage, 1 millimeter of space. And even though it's an on right here, the fact is it's an off right here. Okay, so 1 millimeter away, it's off. Okay, it's going to tend to be off because the angle from this line. Okay, so you know you have to say, see, this one's doing the standard length. This one's going to get longer, but it's only going to get longer by this tiny amount relative to the huge amount. It's, you know, it's a very long line you're measuring on, and so only when you make the line really, really short, okay, can you see the possibility of having a wavelength difference between this line and this line. Okay, so there's going to be nodes, you know, right here crammed up together. So anyway, that's another, it's a subject to be figured out, as because technically it's the argument is that this pattern doesn't matter how long this line is. It matters to do rational comparisons between one node and another node, but it doesn't matter in the sense that theoretically the pattern goes straight through space. So no matter how, whatever distance you're from it, it's always a straight line. And that sort of makes sense here. You can understand, you know, that these two lines are right on top of each other. And so it's sort of telling you it's a straight line. It's always, whatever this distance is, right? Say it's 15.5 nodes, wavelengths. Well, you know if it's 0.5, that there's a 0.5 difference. So it's not a full wavelength. So you know this is an off. And it's an off no matter how long the line is, because 15.5, I can't change how off that is by going further out. So it's sort of telling you, yes, this is all just vectors. I shouldn't say vectors because that implies that's how you're combining the vectors. But it's all just straight lines of on and off. They're on, it's on all the way through space here, and it's off all through space here and on, so there's no, it's all on the same line. Alright, anyway, so with that background, so I have a list in the description. Stephen Brozo says the math isn't predicting on this curved line, and he disagrees with using a string to detect where the nodes are, even though he is using it to show I'm wrong. Ironically, he's using the thing he says doesn't work to prove that I'm wrong. But I'm right, because the string does work. Unfortunately. So obviously this is a little piece of the minutia inside of the big story, okay? And this is what he is so proud of, the fact that he can correct me on this little piece of minutia that he has to make a whole video title devoted to it, even though it has absolutely nothing to do with whether the surfaces are producing the pattern. has nothing to do with whether waves can at all explain this experiment, which they can't. You know, whether you need 4 sources for the double slit or just 2 will work. So show us how 2 sources can create the pattern, Steve. That's your, you know, if you're going to make an argument about my physics and say it's wrong compared to Professor Lewin's physics, Professor Lewin thinks 2 waves can do it. Well, why don't you show me 2 waves doing it? All right. But anyway, so this is just going to be a you know, horribly tedious, but what the fuck. There was no other comment on any of the videos, so this is what we're stuck with. I'm not sure, but I think this, he said he's actually plays my video. I don't know. So I haven't watched these videos. I just heard that he made them, and that somehow he's actually finally paying attention to my original video that I made on photons. Now, obviously, that video does have a mistake in it in the sense that I say, well, you can just add up the nodes. Well, yeah, you can't do that. But everything else in the video is correct. But anyway, let's play along. So we see a preposterous title, a silly icon, blah, 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 blah. So DraftScience theory debunked yet again. So he hasn't done any of this debunking. It's just a pile of nonsense. Again, I'm the one who have debunked the Young analysis. It can't work. Can't possibly work. Feynman is wrong. I mean, you know, just too silly.
This is a variable single slit, but the bottom half of it is converted to a double slit with a pin in the middle, so I can just raise it or lower it.
Okay, so he's raising or lowering a pin into a single slit. And fine. Interesting experiment. Bravo.
Change whether I'm looking at a single slit or...
I mean, you know, I don't see, you know, it's not going to tell you that much, but okay, at least everything stays the same, which is good.
Or a double slit of the same outside width. I'm now shining a laser through it, and you can see it's shining through the double slit at the moment, and you can see it's making a double slit pattern.
Yeah, great. And so we have a certain number of bars, okay, so you can tell by the bar ratio, okay, that the slits, how the small bars are being created by the outside surface. So that's telling you the dimensions of the outside surface. The big envelope is telling you the dimensions of the inside surface. So basically you can just count it as a ratio to 1. Okay, so the outside surface would be making what looks like maybe 20, and so it's like a 20 to 1 differential between the outside and the inside.
You can see it's making a double slit pattern. That's the important bit. And just for the pedants, Gary, there you can see the envelope as well. Here's one I measured earlier.
So what did he say? He said something like, just as you did, Gary. The envelope is important, Steve. So again, anybody who's going to say it's a double slit pattern and they're not including the envelope, you have to concede it's kind of silly to talk about the double slit experiment when you've made the point sources so close to each other that they can't be seen as different points, right? They're less than a wavelength. So the very premise of regular physics, where they said, let's do the double slit experiment, but we'll make the slit so small that there's not a wavelength of difference, therefore you won't see anything. I mean, it's stupid on its face, and the fact that you can't agree and say yes, I mean, conventional physics has fucked this subject up so badly. The fact that you can't say those words just makes you such a fucking intellectually dishonest sack of smelly shit talking crap.
In both double slit mode and single slit mode, I marked the fringes. There were 17 in double slit mode and this set distance, and 19 in single slit mode, counting the central maximum as 2, obviously.
And look, the point of this is just to try and explain to Gary that it's not only the outside surfaces which affect.
Fuck you. I never said it was only the outside surfaces. So that's stupid right on its face. You're making a comparison between a single slit and a double slit, and then you're telling me it's not only the outside surfaces. Where did I ever say it was only the outside surfaces? I mean, the fact that he is too stupid... Well, let's just let him go.
slits, the little fringes. It's also the inside surfaces, as you would call them, the impediment.
Right, so you've just pointed out that I would call them something. So how can you say I have paid too much attention to the outside surfaces, dumbass? He's just such a despicable character.
Varying either of them changes.
Duh. Gee, duh. I've only been saying that for fucking 10 years. I mean, that's not even anywhere near a new thing I've said. I mean, what a fucking asshole. Duh.
The width and number of those little fringes. You want a simple answer, Gary. You want it to be...
Oh, it is simple. So, yes. Yes, so you're just saying you disagree with the conclusion. So why don't you just get to showing how it's wrong? So, look, I've pointed out that we can just forget about doing any double slit math, okay? You don't need any, like anything sophisticated anyway. Because the truth is the double slit is just two single slit patterns. And it's just that people are comparing the wrong single slit patterns, okay? In the sense of two surface patterns. So the simple truth is you can look at the two slits. I've done this so many times. It's just, there's no point, right? I mean, it's just too stupid, okay? So you have two openings, all right? And you're going to say, okay, now these are single experiments doing their own thing. And now I'm going to combine them. And what people are seeing is they're combining this wave with this wave. That's what they keep seeing, right? That's what their vision says is happening. And the simple truth is that's not what's happening. What's happening is this is getting combined and this is getting combined. Those are two separate single slit experiments. This big opening is a single opening experiment. This little impediment is a single impediment experiment. These two experiments are being combined. That's why there's an envelope. This one's making the envelope. I've said it 6 million times. This surface and this surface is making the little bars. Now, I've said that hundreds of times now. Hundreds. Why is he creating this impression that that's not exactly what I've said?
Only the outside surfaces are changing.
Okay, again, it's just too fucking silly. I mean, it's such an insane misquote to say that, oh, somehow I just ignored these surfaces all the time. I never paid any attention to them, never talked about them. I mean, I can't believe he's starting the video with this weak an argument. I can't imagine how weak it gets further down when it's this weak to start. Oh, fuck. I mean, can you be any more of a pointless, insane, fucking lunatic lying troll?
The number of those little fringes, just as it would if it was a single slit experiment. It's not a single slit experiment. It's a double slit experiment.
It's two source experiments combined, which just makes one 4-source experiment, as I've said over and over and over again.
And you have a number of factors affecting the width.
So point them out, please. Show them. Show their vectors. Show Professor Lewin pointing them out. Show one single college professor showing us what these other factors would be, Steve. Because their other factor, frankly, is superposition and all kinds of other nonsense. And there's no evidence of them. Show them showing a single shred of evidence for these other factors. The only thing that's going to change it is how wide the impediment is and how far apart the outside surfaces are. And that's it. And that's why they say, well, you do the experiment with infinitesimally small slits and then our math works. Because their math is eliminating these surfaces. These surfaces can't mean anything, okay, if they're infinitesimally close to each other, you idiot. If they're already less than a wavelength apart, they can't possibly create vectors that are more than a wavelength different than length. Idiot.
Those little fringes, Gary. I'm sorry it's more complicated than you want it to be, but
No,
because you have a simplistic...
So he has no evidence. So he provided zero evidence. So he just did an experiment that provided zero evidence. Zero. That there's anything else involved.
basic idea of how these things work, that's what leads your conclusions to be wrong. That's what leads your so-called
Okay, I just can't believe the video's this bad. I mean, this insanely bad. I mean, to start off with a ludicrous, just a complete misparaphrase of every fucking thing I've said in every one of these fucking videos, over and over and over again. To sit there and misquote me so preposterously. Oh, I just don't. I knew this was going to be rough, but fuck. You are such a fucking petty liar.
Mathematics to be wrong. The mathematics you've never done, even the notches on a string trick that you...
So again, he said it, he said it doesn't work, yet it does work, right? It works. It'll give you a certain impression that's fairly interesting. All right, like I said, I'm not quite sure you can do it at any lengths and any proportions to get right answers, but it clearly does work in the sense that it will create smaller bars and then larger bars. Okay, now whether it creates them in the right size proportions, that's of the actual experiment, well, that's to be debated. Anyway, I have this sped up, right, because this is just so tedious. I've got to, it's just, oh, this is such an annoying hunk of shit.
Use to replace your mathematics, even that you've never actually done, and that's why you don't know what the outcome actually is.
So just more horseshit. I've seen the mathematics. I played the mathematics in my videos over and over again. I've talked about how their D variable is one variable. Just yesterday, I pointed out to you that your stupid, brilliant simulation that's simulating the double slit experiment only has one distance in it, retard. One distance. It has the distance between the two inside surfaces. This is the only distance in his simulation. This distance. And he's giving me instruction on how it's about these other things and these other factors. And you have to include these other factors. His brilliant simulation that's supposed to be the double slit experiment has one fucking distance in the math. Oh, god damn. I mean, he's just such a lying sack of shit. I mean, I said it overtly to him, and he's still in denial somehow, I guess. He still thinks, well, other people can use one distance, and that's okay.
I do, because I've done it. I've taken the trouble.
You haven't done it. Everything you do is tainted by your reckless, sloppy attitude and your whole premise, which is somehow debunk Gary rather than actually find out real information. I mean, you're just such... I mean, even his stupid two-stick thing, right? If you go on the internet, Ken Wheeler types have been sticking needles. You know, they use the 2-needle, 3-needle. So, you know, I think if I type 2-slit needle in, okay, I'll probably get... I'll do that later. I'm probably going to get, what, a few hundred videos?
Time out of my life to do the actual experiment for real. It's not a thought experiment, it's supposed to be a real experiment, Gary. Somebody put this idea...
yeah, whatever. You can't model it. The idea is to model the experiment, asshole. We're trying to figure out how it works. That's how you dissect something. Say if we found an alien spaceship, we would take it apart piece by piece and try to model its functions, idiot.
In your head about 18 months ago, and you adapted it as your own, but you've not actually
done... So you wasted time here, right? I've done the experiment, shithead. It's in my videos, shit for brain. I even made a whole interferometer on my fucking porch, you fucking liar. I mean, it's just... It's not that interesting an experiment. I mean, I'm not saying there's not a lot that we haven't pulled out of this, right? But once you see a good double slit pattern, why do you need to redo it? What is redoing it going to accomplish once somebody's done it well? That is, they got the angles right, they got everything right, so it's not blurry, it's not fuzzy, it doesn't have edges on it, it doesn't have a bunch of blur, it doesn't have a bunch of fade out. Once you have a good vision of the pattern, what else is there to do with it except analyze it? And there's nothing else to do with it, okay? And if you want to try to make something called like a precision variable slit, frankly, you're not going to do that on your porch, idiot. I mean, you are an idiot. I mean, you know, some things have to be precisely machined to work. It's like you're not going to make a car engine out of soda cans, shithead. I mean, not that one that's going to last more than 5 minutes.
done it. You've just pretended. You've just assumed what the answer would be. You've jumped to
This morning, fuck. Assumed the end. Yes, I assumed the dimensions of the nodes was equidistant, because no one said otherwise, you asshole. So yes, I assumed it. So what? It's not terribly relevant. I mean, it doesn't change anything substantially. So we're still saying, why didn't they say these things? If the number of wavelengths in the distance is completely telling you how many bars you have, isn't that a more significant fact they shouldn't have left out? Yeah.
conclusions, the very thing you were always accusing everybody else of doing. And it's you who's done it, Gary.
Just all of this. You see how much time he is wasting with this pointless rhetoric? He barely did an experiment that proved nothing. So he's talking about experiments proving something. Obviously, he didn't prove anything with it, right? Because he found out with the single slit it was 17 and then it was 19 or something. So the numbers come out quite proportional, blah, blah, blah. Very close. So everything I said was essentially verified by his example, because he strawmanned me and pretended I said the opposite somehow when I said exactly that would happen. That's exactly what I predicted. So his experiment verified exactly what I predicted. He pretended I predicted the opposite, which no rational person could ever find in any of my videos. You know, that all the surfaces don't matter. Well, anyway, let's just continue.
You are the conclusion jumper.
So double slit, 170 per metre, and single slit, 190 fringes per metre. They both have...
Yeah, it's within the margin of your error, okay? And what you would expect based on irregularities in the surfaces. So those numbers aren't extremely different.
the same outside width of this variable double slit.
So he went per meter because he extrapolated 15 into 190. So let's just understand, he just cheated it a little bit by playing that game. It was just 17 to 19. So you understand, statistically, if I did a health survey on 19 people, and then I extrapolated that and just pretended it was 1,700 people, you know, that would be called bullshit. And so he just committed a little bit of bullshit. Oh, I'll say how many per meter it is. It's only 17, so let's just understand that's all it is. And obviously the bars get harder and harder to see in the dead spot, so I don't even know how exactly you have to count them as, you know, real ones by the distance between them. So instead of measuring the distance between the bars, he counted the number of bars. So let's understand that as the point. But the point is those two numbers are very consistent when you think about what you're doing. You're filling the void with a needle. And who knows how precise the thickness is and all the rest of that. How much of the space it's consuming.
Again on this sheet of paper so you can see there's no cheating. It's a bit clearer like that. That's roughly the central maxima. So these black marks I'm putting here. That's
roughly. Look at this. So this is how he measured his 17 and 19, is with these fucking marks. Do you see these marks are actually bigger than the nodes he's counting? This is what I mean by, Stephen, you have to do experiments. If you're going to say I love doing experiments and experiments prove everything, you have to do them better than this. This is what was wrong with your stupid lift up the little chess piece. You didn't realize the chess piece can't weigh, you know, it can't be light as a feather. It can't be lighter than the objects that are hitting into the thing. Then you pushed bowling balls with gravity. Gravity doesn't push things consistently, okay? It pushes them based on their mass, so it doesn't produce the same force for different weights. You know, you make these constant mistakes that are in your fucking experiments, and again, so 90% of your experiments have fundamental flaws in them, and you're pretending that you're doing just fine. You're a very good experimentalist. I'm a very good experimentalist. Asperger.
The envelope minima, and then there's another one there. Difficult to film at the same time as doing it. Obviously that distance is half that distance. That distance is double.
We all know that already. It's already been stated by every single person on Earth. Everybody in this conversation, okay? Every single person in the conversation now knows that. I mean, whether it's exactly double is the whole issue. Whether it varies, depending on whether you're wavelength off or not, you know, what numbers you're put in. That's the question. And again, it's just a mathematical vector. So all you have to do is explain why it's a double maxima. So let me hear your explanation for why.
That distance. It always is. There's always an odd number of fringes in that distance. I'll mark them up now. That's the double slit one marked up.
So there's always an odd number of fringes, even though we see every single one of these, right? So that's the trick of the double slit experiment, is the underlying pattern still there. Okay, the little dots are still viewable. So this is the irony, right? This isn't actually a dark spot in the envelope. The envelope was still producing photons, and that's why they're going to still show up. And this is the same is true for the outside surfaces. They're still producing photons. The two sources are producing. They're just not producing as many photons as when both sources make a contribution. So you will see in phase for the two outside surfaces, even though the envelope says it's supposed to be a dark, because the envelope didn't kill it. Look how he drew these dots. He has this one, and he's just ignoring this one. Oh, fuck him. I'm just going to count this one, and then I'm going to... What the fuck is this? So again, I'm supposed to be impressed with the high precision of his measurements. Squiggly line, we'll just skip that one. I don't like him. He should be ignored.
I'll put a measuring tape against that in a minute. Now I will go to the variable slit. Keep the slit width the same, so I've not altered that yet. The bottom half.
So he's just wasting, which is a really nice piece of hardware he apparently has here. And he's just wasting it, obsessing about trying to prove me wrong rather than show how the experiment works. Oh, what a pathetic asshole.
Converted to a double slit with a pin in the middle. Now I lower it because it's on a microscope stand, so I can drop it, so it's only a single slit.
Yeah, so he broke a microscope. I was going to do the same thing. I actually have a really nice microscope that has a nice, you can move the pedestal. I was going to do exactly the same thing. But I said, why am I going to break a good microscope for this purpose? Forget it. I'm not doing it.
Now I have a single slit. I'll mark that one up now. And there, you can see that I've made an honest marking of the fringes.
I can see that. Oh, flash, 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 flash. I could see that? No, I couldn't see it. Well, anyway, it doesn't matter, right? Did we see it? No. Yeah, I didn't see it. No chance. It was a frame that was on the screen for, you know, what? 0.3 of a second.
The double slit on the top and the single slit on the bottom of the same outside width, and I'm making 16 fringes and 19 fringes respectively. So the double slit was making 160 fringes per metre, 16 fringes in this decimetre, and the single slit was making 190 fringes per metre. 90.
Well, we don't see any of that actually. If so, you know, great job, Steve. You did a really precision job. We don't even know what the slits he's putting together are made out of. We don't have any information regarding how this is done at all. Nothing.
Fringes in this decimetre, counting the central maximum as 2.
Whatever this is. Right, so I'm supposed to count your bullshit as meaningful. Yeah, no, I don't, sorry. So we know these are supposed to be much closer, you know, the first ones get closer and then they get bigger and bigger and bigger, further apart. So that's part of what was debated and disputed. So obviously the spacing in a certain amount of spacing is going to change depending on how big the slits are. So that's another thing to consider. But frankly, considering that this isn't that far off. So you think this is dramatic evidence of the fact that the surfaces aren't controlling the experiment. You think this is dramatic. So when you cranked your needle up, nothing else changed subtly. The other slit variables couldn't have been affected, just slightly. And frankly, it's a very slight difference. Now it was 17 to 19 before. Now he says it's 16 to 19. But we saw how he counted, didn't we? Didn't we see him not put a little notch where there was an obvious little round spot?
For obvious reasons. But that means that Gary's fringe width cannot be correct. Because in real life, the outside ones give a different result depending on whether there's an impediment included or not. Now, Gary's...
Okay, so says Steve. Okay, again, with a pretty crude experiment, not really shown. So he says the difference is 3. In the other experiment was 2, but whatever. and we can't account for that for any other reason than magic. There has to be a magic cause. It's not the number of wavelengths and the vectors. So I will argue that mathematically he doesn't have any choice here. Okay, so what he's doing is, it's so fundamentally stupid, because he's arguing against Professor Lewin, and I lecture online, and every person who ever does any kind of math to analyze the experiment. He's disputing them too, because they understand it is their math is dependent on the distance between the surfaces, Steve. So what you're saying you just did was this. This is what Steve says he just proved. All right, we took we have a single impediment of a set distance, and then we have an opening of a set distance. And what he's saying is this set distance, okay, produces a certain number of nodes. And so based on how many wavelengths fit in here. And what he's saying is when I do the single slit, okay, 17. And then when I shove this in, somehow I change this distance, and now it's 19. Okay, so when I put the impediment in, I change the 17 into 19. Now you do understand that what he's arguing, conventional physics, okay, would say it's impossible too, because you can't change the number of wavelengths in this difference. The mathematics is the mathematics. There's only 17 places, or 19, or 18, right? There's only that number of places where the vector has a full wavelength of difference. That's all there are. There's a finite number of these, dictated by this distance, Steve. That's their math. So if you're saying it changes, that even though this distance is the same exact distance, the same number of wavelengths fit in it, you're saying there's more vectors where there's a whole wavelength of difference. Somehow, by putting this in, you change this distance. And that's what you have to do. Now, I'd say obviously you didn't do that. Obviously you didn't prove that. And obviously you didn't prove their math wrong too. Okay, because frankly their math is correct in the sense that their math is establishing quite sensibly that the distance between the surfaces is all that matters. That's exactly their single slit math. So again, what did you prove? You proved you do shitty experiments. That's what you just proved, Steve. That you're too shitty to actually realize you have a huge margin of error. The Steve-O factor. The Bruffy factor. You forgot to include the Bruffy is an incompetent shit-talking asshole factor. And that's what fucked your results, moron. I can't, this is going to take decades.
Theory doesn't take that into account, so it can't be right.
So, obviously a really weak proof. Could we agree on that? Could all the little rational people on Earth agree, well, that was a pretty weak proof, Steve? Gotta do a little better than that.
I've now done this experiment about 4 or 5 times.
Okay, good. So you proved Professor Lewin wrong. So go on his video and harass him now. You proved all of physics wrong, Steve, because all of physics thinks it matters how many wavelengths fit in D, a distance. And you just proved it doesn't matter. I can make extra points where there's a wavelength of a full wavelength of difference by simply inserting something in there. I make the surfaces go further apart or something. Something changes about the number, the D number. It's now a completely different number. Shit. For brain.
I've done it twice today. First one I did today and it gave that result. And I've done it again just now and it gave that result. And I've done it in May 2020 using a hair instead of a pin as the impediment. And that gives far more dramatic.
So let's just understand that these are really small objects. A hair, all you have to do is rotate it and you've got different dimensions. I mean, stretch it a tiny bit, you got different dimensions. I mean, obviously that experiment, you can't have any reliability that you're from experiment to experiment that you're actually dealing with the same exact distance. You would expect variances of these tiny fractions. Okay, I mean, frankly, these are small percentages when you think of what a node is and how little it takes to be off by that much. A tiny change.
Result. The fringes then become twice the size with the inclusion of a hair, making it a double slit.
An example of that is coming up very, very shortly in the next minute or so.
Oh, that'll be very exciting. I can't wait.
Where everybody's in this video. So have patience, it's there.
So just understand, he's making all this effort to prove Professor Lewin and every physicist, pretty much that's ever done the math, that he's proving them all wrong. That it has nothing to do with the distance between those surfaces. That doesn't have anything to do with the single slit. You can change how many nodes there are by, sticking your tongue in between them.
You get to see how dramatically the width of those little tiny fringes changes just by the inclusion of the impediment that Gary claims has no part in that. He's an idiot.
Well, obviously, I say that the single impediment has no part, the impediment in the middle, the small distance, has no part in the fringe size of the little notches. Yeah, it plays no role. Yeah. But I've certainly said it certainly matters to the envelope. And we saw how you counted the fringes, right? So we saw him, I mean, I could go back to that slide, right? But you could see there were, there were clear little dots, okay? And you could see them, okay? And he counted 1, 2, 3, 4, well, fuck him. 1, 2, 3, he just ignored it. Fuck.
Almost as if the impediment acts as a magnifier, and the smaller it is, the greater.
Okay, so this is your theory. So we know his theory has something to do with some sort of magic stuff that's going through. So it doesn't have anything to do with what their math says, which is the d distance. Okay, the d distance isn't deciding how many nodes there are. It's some magical thing where you can, you put stuff inside of there and you can make all kinds of magical things change the d distance. And you won't get the number based on how many wavelengths there are in the distance between the two surfaces. So the distance between the two surfaces isn't meaningful. What's in there? Little gremlins and things. Ooh.
It magnifies the pattern made by the outside width of the theory. Just for reference, this is what it's been set to.
It's a theory with actually no mechanism, so it's even less than their theories, which have no mechanism either. Yours just has another new thing. The bro-wooey thingy. Brozoian.
I don't want to alter it, but I don't think it's calibrated correctly. I think it needs recalibrating because I think it's more than that. That works out to 900 microns, but I think the slit is greater than 900 microns. Now that pin in the bottom measures at 670 microns. Anyway, I want to leave that as it is.
So do you believe Steve can do those kinds of measurements well? Irrelevant. The point is you've made an assertion that I can make two outside surfaces and somehow it isn't perfectly correlatable to how many bars are going to be in there by those surfaces. And if I shove different things in here, I somehow completely change the little bars. I can change how many wavelengths, how many whole wavelengths of difference there are. I can change how many whole wavelengths of difference is possible by leaving the thing exactly the same, but shoving something else inside. I'm sorry, Steve, that can't make any sense if you think about it, but he doesn't do any of this necessary thinking part.
I want to replace that impediment, that 670 micron pin. I want to replace it with something 200 microns less. So I'm going to leave this setting the same. So there's the pin I'm going to replace, 670 microns. Okay, so now I've replaced...
So that's rather big. Okay, so he has a very wide double slit, so it's going to be small little bars.
That pin with a 500 micron one.
Yeah, say very small little bars. Right, okay. So, yeah, forget it. Yes. I'm really not going to trust his count on this one.
And you've gone in at a slight angle, which illustrates something else very interesting. When you put the impediment in at a slight angle, you can then see the two patterns. You can see that the pattern on top is a longer...
That's not the envelope. Well, wait, the pattern on top. So what he's done is put a giant thing. So he's put a giant impediment with very wide distance. So this is what he's actually done. Yeah. All right. So you have a wide slit. So he has a very wide slit. And now he has shoved a very big, okay, very thick thing in. So he's created two large distances, which means both patterns will be large. Oh yeah, but this distance still has to be twice this. No, it's not twice. You can see see before where there was a factor, right, 12 to 1. Now the factor is like 1.5 to 1. So yeah, this is what he's done. So the difference between this distance and this distance is a little less than a half, or a little bit more, however you want to. This one's 1/2 the distance of this one's twice. This one's a little bit more than. It's less than, this distance is less than twice this distance. So if this distance was 5, this one is 8. But that's the experiment he's done. So he's done a too narrow slit experiment with a very wide impediment. So perfectly consistent with what my theory would predict. The inside surface is big, the outside surface isn't much bigger, but it's a little bigger. So that's exactly the result he got. So the outside surfaces are creating these bottom bars. The inside surface, the giant impediment, is creating the top ones. And there's less than 2 nodes, less than 2 inside of one of those envelope ones, meaning the outside surfaces are less than, if you counted how much the surface, the opening was, it's less than half the thickness of the bar he stuck inside. So perfectly consistent with everything I've said.
Pattern, a wider pattern, and not one on the bottom. It's a good way of separating out the impediment pattern. And again, the wording should speak for itself.
So the fact that I've just made a video previous to this, pointing out some basic facts, like the double slit experiment is just 2 single slit experiments placed on top of each other. He just showed proof of it, essentially. He just showed how, yeah, you can separate out the 2 objects, the impediment and the slit. You can separate them out by putting it in on an angle. So yeah, I've just proved Gary right again. Damn.
Those who can't be bothered reading it. The point I'm trying to get across is that the inclusion of the small impediment expands the small fringes that would otherwise be...
Alright, so let's understand. It didn't expand anything, so it certainly didn't show that in that experiment. Obviously, we can doubt how well he counted when the little bars were bigger. Now he's made the little bars even smaller and says, I counted them, blah, blah, blah. And he didn't count them. We didn't even see him counting anything. So he's just saying 130 per meter. So again, he's taking a number like 13 and he's turning it into how many meters it would have been, per meter. So he's statistically pushing these numbers to make them look like he did 100 permutations, and this is what happened. When it's like me flipping a coin, and I say, I flip 3 times, I get 3 heads. Or I get 3 heads and 1 tail. And then I take those numbers and say, it's 400 to 100. It's 4,000 to 1,000. That was the ratio. It's proven. And you would realize that if you would have said 4 to 1, you would say, yeah, that can happen all the time. I mean, that's not a big deal. But 4,000 to 1,000, that's a big deal. So this is where statistics can lie through their teeth. If they're, teeth and bro, that doesn't work. So I can't, obviously they can lie when they don't have teeth too.
Created by the outside width. If it was a wide single slit, those tiny fringes then become expanded by whatever size impediment you put in.
Alright, so complete horseshit. He hasn't proven it, hasn't shown it. Again, this is 13. This isn't 130. This is 13. And he certainly, so what? It's 13 because you changed the slit width this time, you moron. Oh, god damn.
The smaller the impediment, the more it expands that pattern. Well, that's one way of looking at it anyway. So
it can't. So let's just understand. He said, he's basically saying the same dimension can make 16 nodes, or it can make 17 nodes, or it can make 35 nodes by Brozian logic. So again, Professor Lewin won't say that. Nobody else, no mathematician would say that's possible, Steve. You can't have more places where there's a wavelength of difference than you have wavelengths in the distance. You can't do that, asshole.
You can almost look at the impediment as a magnifying glass with the tiny fringes made by that wide single slit. That example, I promise you, with the hair is coming up, I promise you.
Oh, yeah, I'm just so excited, so excited. So this is an experiment Newton did. Let's understand. Newton, 1667.
Coming up very shortly.
Well, I've marked the fringes, and once more, because we're using a smaller impediment, 500 microns versus 670 microns before, but the slit has the same outside width, and this expands the small fringes to now fit 130 per metre. We can fit less and less in per metre, the smaller we make the impediment. Now in...
Yeah, just absolute horseshit. I'm just sorry. It's just horseshit. I mean, it's just horseshit. It's just horseshit. Alright, but whatever. So his theory is, okay, I put the impediment in, and somehow it's using up, okay, wavelength differences in vectors. So certain vectors have to get used up somehow and disappear. They don't work anymore. They can't make a full wavelength of difference. It's just kind of funny, because all this, there's on one half they're arguing that this has all kinds of mathematical rigor, that it's a mathematical universe, and the next minute they turn that math on its upside down and just sit there and deny its existence. I mean, he's basically denying the mathematics that all of them use. He's saying it doesn't work. It isn't a representation of what's happening. It's just amazing.
Previous experiments where I've gone down to the thickness of a human hair, about 75 microns. In that case, the small fringe is doubled in width, halved in number, how many you would get per metre. Halved the number you would fit per metre.
Okay, just
of course, but he's saying, so you put a hair in, and he's saying that the outside surfaces now produced much smaller fringes in the double slit experiment. Okay, so let's see. Let's see that. So now we have the opposite of this experiment. So now he did the very opposite of this one. And he's saying this is always staying the same. So somehow, okay, so now he's going to put a tiny thin thing in here. So thin that it has no dimensions. Let's understand, it's almost like saying I'm going to put in nothing. So we'll see if we have an envelope pattern. If we don't have an envelope pattern, or we do, right, then the argument could be he's just doing the single hair experiment. Okay, so the nodes he's going to get is based on the fact that the hair, let me think, okay, the hair is going to create big pattern because it's a tiny distance between the two surfaces. So let's see what the pattern looks like.
very quick look at that old experiment from 2020.
This is the sort of width of slit we're talking about now. You see the hair? Very wide slit.
You can see the small fringe.
Okay, so he's got two openings, and so we don't know the scales, and we certainly don't know the dimensions of the outside surfaces. So clearly he's arguing that, look, see, the small bars are different, and he's showing us an experiment he did a year previous, and somehow we're supposed to believe it's exactly the same width. Yeah, I'm not going to believe that. Sorry, Steve. Try again.
Fringes made by the double slit pattern. Then in a moment you'll see where I marked these fringes.
So obviously in marking them, again, so the only thing the hair is going to do is make the envelope bigger.
On the ruler with a felt tip pen, a Sharpie, so I can then remove the 75 micron hair, then see how big the fringes are.
So again, he's going to count them based on how many are in the nodes of the envelope. And the ones in the node of the envelope, of course, changes because you're changing the size of the envelope pattern. Idiot.
And you will see that they halve in size. Then you will see that they shrink in size, almost as if the impediment was effectively magnifying those fringes made by the large single slit.
I don't know. So he's showing us an old image of a hair. Why don't you just do the new one with the hair? I don't know.
It would be if there were no impediment in it. Okay?
And now the blue lines represent the envelope.
Those black pen marks you can see on that ruler, those mark the width of the fringes before I remove the impediment. And these ones circled in yellow show how they shrink when we remove the impediment. So this is from an old experiment in 2020. Removing the 75 micron hair from a double slit made the tiny fringes, circled in yellow. But with the 75 micron hair still in place, the tiny fringes were twice as wide, circled.
Alright, so these aren't great images, but let's see if we can get that. And we'll have some new theory. So again, this just doesn't debunk me. It debunks the whole idea of wavelengths mattering inside, that fit inside the surface. So just like he has, exclusive evidence regarding kinetic energy and its proof, he made a spring produce uneven momentums. So he made the same spring produce different momentums, not conserving momentum. He showed that you can violate conservation of momentum. So, well, anyway.
The tiny fringes were twice as wide, circled in green here, and emphasize a little.
Okay, circled in green. Alright, so that's what he's saying. This was the comparison. So they got this small when he did this experiment. Now, I just don't know what analysis you're going to use to explain that, Steve, but okay. I'll take it under advisement. You made this actually happen. You took the same exact slit, this dimension, a certain size, no hair. And, no, you can't put no hair in and get a double slit pattern, can you? No, you can't. Okay, so you're just going to compare the single slit pattern with a double slit pattern. So you take this dimension and then you stick a hair in it, creating an envelope, and you're saying the little bars now change size. Cast on the same screen at the same dimensions. I'm saying that there's just no, obviously we know they're not the same size in the sense that we know they get progressively larger. So the point would be is maybe you're changing that ratio of how many there are, but let's say what the total bars would be on an arc. You're saying there's twice as many bars on that arc now. Is that your assertion? Are you going to go that far? Because the spacing, we already have now established they don't stay spaced the same. That is, the small one, they're closer together up here, and then as you go around the arc, they get fatter and fatter. Many times the same size, 10 times actually, more. They get big, and they get smaller and smaller as you go in. So have you changed that ratio, would be the question. By changing the actual number of points where you can have a full wavelength of difference, I don't think you can do that, Steve. I just don't see how it's possible to change that number.
A little bit. My original marks aren't too clear, so I'll help you out. There you go. Those are the original widths when it was in double slit mode. And again, in yellow, single slit mode. Anyone can see that in double slit mode, those tiny fringes get doubled in size.
So nobody can see how this, we should trust Steve. He did a good experiment. So obviously, who knows? Yeah, I'm not convinced by Steve's experiment. It's a rather dramatic statement he's making. The distance doesn't matter. I can make as many points where there's constructive interference as I want. It doesn't matter how many wavelengths are between the distance. I can make 1,000 or 1,000,000 or 1,000,000,000. I just stick smaller and smaller objects in. I make more and more nodes or something. I don't know what the theory is, but I'm saying it mechanically doesn't work.
In this case, anyone can see that when the slit was in single slit mode without any impediment, making it
You
a double
keep
slit,
saying
then
it.
we had thinner fringes.
Anyone
so when we
can
do make
see
a double
it.
slit, it's almost as if putting that impediment in expands or magnifies those same fringes. But that's just a different way of looking at the same problem. Who can tell?
So that's his great explanation, is who can tell. Yes, I proved all the physics wrong and Gary. Okay, all the physics and Gary. Okay, but I'll just pay attention to the Gary part, and I will never make these. I'll never present this evidence to Professor Lewin or any other physicist ever, because I'm so confident it's right, and I'm so confident they're wrong. But I don't need to tell them they're wrong. I need to tell Gary he's wrong. I mean, you see how retarded this all is? He's saying, I found a new fact. Okay? And what am I going to do with it? Oh, I'm going to try to hit Gary with it. Oh, okay. You're just such an asshole.
So again, Gary's theory cannot be correct. And we're now on a 350 micron impediment.
Let's understand, it's not my theory. What he's disputing is what every single mathematician, every single physicist is using as logic. It's what they think how it works. Okay. So anyway.
One of these angled experiments, you can see that the top pattern is made by one and the lower pattern is made by the other. So you can see that the top and bottom patterns, the impediment and the fringes made by the slit, have now separated. So we can.
Super, and exactly what I said. So so that part you're saying matches exactly what Gary says. That the one distance is making the little bars, the other dart is making big bars, but and then in the same voice you're going to say, but I can change the size of those bars anytime I want to, by just shoving a little crap in there. I don't think so.
See the individual patterns that go to make up the overall pattern. When the impediment and the slit widths are comparable, then they kind of fight each other. At least we can see the two patterns separated out because they are at angles to one another.
How are they fighting each other when they're mathematically coming out to be exactly proportional to the distances? So they're doing exactly what the distances say they have to do, and yet you're saying they're changing each other. But they're exactly where the math would predict. Sorry, Steve.
Enough so we can see that we have two different patterns. So the thinner dimension is creating the upper pattern and the wider dimension is creating the lower pattern. I hope it's recording well. You see the two patterns separated out?
I'm just amazed. He just said exactly what I've been saying for years. Well, now, more than a year now. That the outside surfaces are making the small pattern, the inside surfaces are making the big pattern. Exactly what I've been saying. Exactly.
I've confirmed that the upper pattern, the little dots, those work out to 180 per metre. Those are caused by the existing outside slit width, as if it was a giant.
So again, he just said it. He just said the little dots are being created by the outside slit width. It's exactly what I've been saying. Exactly what I've been drawing. All these, I mean, it's actually on the board still, right? It's still on the board, the drawing. This distance here, yes. And then there's this distance, whatever you have on the inside. And that's making the envelope pattern. And this is making the little bars. I've been saying those exact words over and over hundreds of times. I mean, fuck.
And the lower dash 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 type pattern, there are 70 of those per metre, and those are caused by the wire impediment, which is 300.
Right, so he he's just so insane. He's saying exactly what I've been saying. He's saying, there's the conclusion. That's what's been happening. And, anyway, there's no point, right? This is too ludicrous. I just can't believe he just basically is reciting exactly what I've been saying. The two shortest distances between two surfaces are creating the big pattern. The biggest distance between two surfaces is creating the small pattern. Exactly what I've been drawing, exactly what I've been illustrating, exactly what I've been saying. Blah, 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 blah. Unbelievable.
The microns.
But you'll see shortly that where those two do cross dead in the middle, the central maxima, we do actually get a third different measurement for the fringes then. Have patience, all will become clear.
Oh, okay, so now he's going to show us. So he's arguing that, yes, I'm correct, that he's basically isolated the two patterns, and now when he combines them, right, they're going to change. Well, of course they're going to change, because now there's going to be offs. Okay? The envelope, well, he says the number is going to change. So that's what we have to see. So he's saying the number of nodes will change. Okay. All right. So if you can show this, that'll be impressive. So let's see if you can do it.
I think. It's confusing actually, but it's clear as it's going to get.
The central maxima.
It's as clear as it's going to get. This is as clear as it's going to get. What? Yeah, you got to do a little better than this. This isn't exactly what, the gold medal looks like. Sorry. You did it, Steve!
I'm not sure whether to interpret that central maxima as having three central fringes.
So, obviously, I don't know why you can't combine the two images. So he puts a hair in between the two slits and somehow he gets this. Or he puts something else in front and now he gets this. Why is it so unclear? Why is it such a fucking mess? You just showed us, right? Two really clear patterns and all of a sudden it's this? Come on, Steve. What's the bullshit here?
7. It's always an odd number anyway, whether it's 5 or 3, either way. Those fringes work out to 140 per meter.
Okay, so he did it again, right? So he's doing this idea. So now he counted 14. He's just counting how many nodes he's counting. And so I already showed, right? He doesn't count the ones that are clearly visible. So he's clearly fucking the numbers.
So I've written on the right hand side, those work out to 140 per meter. You might need to pause the video to read this.
All right, so obviously horseshit. Okay, obvious horseshit. I'm going to call obvious horseshit.
Anybody can be bothered, but never mind.
So there's a summary. Those little tiny dot saves are made by the outside slit width, that's 180 per meter. Then the dashes, those wider dashes, there were 70 per meter of those, and those are caused by the impediment, which is a 350 micron wire.
Right, so we got 180, which is 18, and we got 7. Okay, so they, I saw the opposite of what he wrote down here, right? When those are the nodes that were, not quite, where it wasn't quite twice as many, He says there was twice as many by 20%. It looked like less than twice as many.
But the interference between the two of them in the central maximum, whether it's 5 fringes or 3, that works out to...
Okay, so the difference is 1. What was the first number? Shit. The 70 number doesn't matter. That's the other pattern. The number that matters is he's saying it goes from 180, okay, to 140. I say it's Brozian error. But
those are caused by the impediment, which is a 350 micron wire. But the interference between the two of them in the central maximum, whether it's 5 fringes or 3, that works out to 140 per meter in the central maximum. So you can count them yourself if you wish.
Yeah, so what is this? Count them yourself if you wish. Okay. so, here's his scale. It starts on a dark, I can't even tell. So we're supposed to rely on this. And he has the 2 spreading again. So, it doesn't even make much sense, right? So we're actually seeing the 2 patterns separated. But he's saying they're combining to create a different number. So even though they're still separated in this image, the 2 are still separated in the image. They can't be, they're not combined, obviously. So he's saying that somehow, even when I don't combine them, they change just because they know they're sort of close to each other or something. Or Stephen Bro knows when they're combining to create some new number, and when they don't combine, Stephen knows the difference. Even though that looks exactly, except for it being shittier, less viewable, that looks exactly what he showed when he used the original number, right, of 180. That's exactly what he showed, right? Little bars, and then bigger bars right below it. It's exactly the same image. It's just shittier. And he's saying it's a new distance. No point, right? So obviously this isn't proof of anything, and again, what's already been well established now, which is a good thing to have established by the Maisamoshi guy and Stephen, okay, is that no one talked about it, but the fact is these nodes, okay, are really close to each other, and then they get further and further and further apart, okay, as they get bigger. So we know that even though the number has to be a set number, 18 or whatever it would be for a certain distance of slit, that exactly the ratio of this progression of size change would change as you change. I don't know what it could actually change that would change it in any way, but anyway. So you could just imagine, though, that all I have to do is affect where this first one starts or something, and that'll change the proportions, the distance between them. Like I can change the distance between them, but I won't change the absolute number of total nodes per 180 degrees. But anyway, they have variable size. but they don't have a variable number. So that would be the important distinction. A certain distance has a certain number of wavelengths in it. So you can't change how many of those things there are, but you can change their relationship to each other. But mostly by changing the distance. So I don't know how he's going to... It still looks like this is Brozian error.
Yeah, the 3 occupy about 2.3, 2.4 centimetres, and the 5 that would occupy about, so what's it, 4.6, what do you say?
I'm actually measuring 7 tiny fringes in at 4.6 measurements out of there. It is confusing, isn't it?
Yes, it's difficult to do this accurately. I'm just trying to give you an overall impression.
Okay, it's difficult to do accurately, but I'm going to make a dramatic statement that proves all the physics wrong and Gary wrong with this not very accurate pile of shit where they're still separated, and I'm saying it's a combined image when they're still separate. I can still see these little dots, and I can still see these big dashes, yet they're combined, even though I can see them separately. They're combined. In the other experiment I showed, where it was even clear that they were separated, I know they didn't combine. This is combined, and the other one is uncombined, even though they look really the same. Oh yeah. Never mind, right? Too stupid. Yeah.
So you're going around making simplistic claims like Gary does.
Okay, you just made a bunch of claims like Stephen Bro does. He has violated the conservation of kinetic energy. He makes a spring that only produces 1.4 the velocity. I put a heavier object on, the spring don't work no more. I put a lighter object on. It doesn't produce the same amount of momentum.
In simple, that's what I'm saying. Okay, one more look at it without all my handwriting cluttering the way.
Alright, clearly separating. So he's saying when they're combined, they're creating a new number, but when they're separate, there's no new, they're a different size. That's his argument fundamentally. What you could argue here fundamentally is that obviously because he's gotten so many of them to show up, they are getting larger as they go out. So their spacing is getting larger as they go further out. So let's understand, he's using one little piece of a segment to count. And so he's counting in different places. So if you don't count exactly at the beginning, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, then you're not counting whether the same size. So that's what he did. That's the simple mistake he made. So I should use my little drawing tool, but you can see the mouse. Here, the bars are bigger. So obviously in 1 inch, there's fewer. Here, the little bars are smaller. So in 1 inch, there's more. So if you don't precisely measure them from the same points, you won't get the same answer, because their size changes relative to each other.
So scanning from left to right reasonably slowly.
So he's saying those are 2 combined patterns. That's a combined pattern. So when he showed them separate like this, like exactly like this. So he showed us an image that was exactly like this, where the 2 are separated. And he said, this is how big they are when they're separated. And now this is actually the combined image. Now even though it looks exactly like the separated image, this is when they're combined. Huh?
Goes on for quite some time, doesn't it? Well, I run out of board. I've been trying to readjust the angle to get rid of the angle, but it keeps springing back. It's very, very tricky, but it does appear to be a 3 fringe central maxima after all.
Correction. I later took a snapshot of it and spent some time inspecting this in some detail, and I came to the opposite conclusion.
Okay, so I don't know why he makes videos this way. You know, he shouldn't do the commentary. He should just film the experiment and then do all of his commentary after he's completed these projects. This idea of talking about it while you're in the process of doing the experiment, in my opinion, is probably not very smart. It's not a very coherent way to do this. Do the experiment and show it. That's what I did in my video, right? I did the experiment and I showed an image of me doing the experiment and I talked about what I did.
No, it's 5 in the central maxima, and so all the other envelope fringes nearby, they all contain 2.5. I know it sounds daft, but that's how it works out. You always have an odd number in the middle, and then you have to divide that by 2, and that's what you get in the others. So that the central maximum always has an odd number, and therefore...
Right, and why does it always have an odd number? It's because the central one, okay, is a fake. Yeah. But anyway, so it's good to know. It's always an odd number. Okay, but see, that's the trick though, right? It's always an odd number if Steve's doing the counting, because only one node is being wiped out. So I guess technically you could argue it has to be an odd number, because you couldn't put the dark nodes, you couldn't superimpose the envelope on with an even number, because then you'd have an even number remainder. So you have to have an odd number because you have to have an even number on both sides.
The others also have an odd fractional number. Is that the right way to say it? I'm not a math person. Does it show? But at least I'm better at math than Gary, for fuck's sake.
See, he keeps saying things like that, but there's absolutely no evidence. I've never seen you do a single mathematical thing ever. I've never even heard you say divide lambda into something. At least I've done that much. You haven't done any math.
And here is a 20-second series of pictures just showing you how I came to that conclusion. Okay.
Okay, yeah, well, what I see is shit. Okay, so I see you wanted to come to a conclusion. Not that the conclusion was anything reasonable to come to. Alright, so that convinces us all, right? That's so convincing. It's so obviously clear. Oh, wait a minute. No, it's not clear at all.
It's almost in line, but I need to set the camera up so the camera carries on running while I'm over there making the adjustments. I can't do both.
This is effectively a very...
So this is the stupid part, right? Right? He could do both if you just quit trying to do your, commentary while you're doing your experiments. Maybe you should shut up and do the experiment and film it correctly and then talk about it.
Very crude way of doing a variable double slit. It's not quite right, though. Still quite interesting, until the camera failed on me again.
Yeah, I'm trying to get them aligned so there's no angle between the two patterns that comprise a double slit pattern.
Right, so he's trying to actually combine them so he could actually do the experiment he claims he did. But he doesn't actually combine them, as it clearly was visible in the image he showed. He clearly didn't combine them, but he said, I'm going to declare they're combined even when they're not, and I'm going to find a different number. So even though they're not combined, they created a different number. I mean, this is just such crap, and I can't believe he wasted. I mean, all the, like I said, the little minutiae you can get me on exists, okay? I have made mistakes. This argument is just too stupid. So he wants to actually argue that surfaces aren't creating the phenomenon when, I mean, come on. It's so obvious.
Trying to get them aligned. From here I can't see how successful or unsuccessful I'm being. That's
So for whatever reason, he can do the single hair by itself and get a good clear pattern, and he can do the two surfaces and get a good pattern, but somehow he can't combine them and get a good pattern. But that's okay. I mean, it's hard to do. Getting good clear patterns requires some work. I mean, I used, brand new razor blades, and I was getting a shitty pattern. I looked at the goddamn, I took the microscope and looked at the damn blades and found, oh, no wonder I'm getting a shitty pattern, because the razor blade doesn't have a very clean edge.
I think I'm aligning it, it's hard to tell.
Unfortunately, my camera malfunctioned. I'm afraid the camera went wonky and started going blurred, so I didn't capture the rest, apart from that little bit. Which is pretty annoying when it started to look rather good.
I'll close the slit down completely there. Trying to explain all this to Gary last night, how interesting it was to look at these variable double slit patterns, and he just said it was a dopey and irrelevant comment.
No, I say variable is really interesting, but the interesting part is varying it incrementally. Like Professor Lewin's cranking it, right? And the interesting part would be to see how much the pattern changes per increment of change in the wavelength difference. It would be really interesting to see that progression of change. So you need a very good variable slit.
So we didn't read this out, he deleted the comment. And then, hey, what's the surprise? A week or two later, he's talking about saying...
Bullshit. So this is just more of Stephen Brozo's imagination, that he said something that was at all relevant ever, and that I stole his brilliant idea. Wrong again. And here he's saying I'm wrong, and yet he's saying I stole the ideas. It's just that, you know, you can't get this fucking ludicrous without really trying.
You come up with this idea to do a variable double slit.
Graph physics video presentation.
So here I'm showing the good image just to point out single slit above, double slit below. Okay, you know, of the envelope sizes. So it just gives an illustration of what a single slit does versus what the double slit does. If you really separated the two patterns, this is what you're going to get.
What locations will bricks of light on?
So look, he's cut all these little pieces out of my video. Can you get more ludicrous? He just sits there and lets me speak 3 words out of one video, and then he combines them with the other video. Is this somebody trying to be honest? Is this what you do when you're honestly trying to respond to somebody's video? So I should have just taken 45 seconds of Steven's video here and just played the little 45-second clips. You know, where he says something like, well, yeah, this is a little sloppy. Oh, this is garbage. Oh, wait, that wasn't quite right. Oh, it's my camera. I could just play all that crap and then say, what, I won the argument? I mean, it's just so childish. Oh, fuck.
After surprise, a week or two later, he's talking about saying he's come up with this idea to do a variable double slit.
Okay, come up with the idea to do a variable double slit. I played Professor Lewin at least, what, 3-4 years ago doing the variable single slit and made this point in my video. That it'd be nice to have a variable double slit. Duh! Oh, amazing. It's just amazing. Yeah, he's amazingly stupid. So we think it would have never occurred to me, even though I played that Professor Lewin clip of the variable slit, you know, maybe a dozen times, at least a dozen different videos. It's getting longer and bigger, blah, blah, blah. Light plus light equals no light. Kind of crap.
Graph physics video presentation. What?
So somehow, I guess that was what? A magical moment. So you could see a little part of my leg indicating that maybe I'm not wearing long pants. Wow, that means a lot to everybody, doesn't it? Yeah. Why is that in here? Why? What's... As if it would in some way, what? Bother me in some way? No, I'm sorry, yeah, no. It's like, that's to me not an embarrassing moment. For me. It's not embarrassing for me. It's embarrassing for you people because, yeah, frankly, you know, you're hideous. But anyway.
What locations will bricks of light on? And Stephen asked some dopey question, but I think it's totally irrelevant about, you know, like I said, we already know what causes the pattern, right? I mean, I've outed the whole thing for you. I have explained it for you. I was sitting here for years.
Okay, so we don't hear from Stephen what was in his comment that was so brilliant, right? Now, if he says the brilliant observation is, why don't you do a variable double slit? I mean, obviously that could occur to any moron on Earth. The needle experiments might actually, I have some of the needle experiments actually in my older videos. So I should say that Stephen stole the 2-stick idea from me because I have the needle experiments in my video. True. I mean, people have been sticking needles in clay. You know, like I said, there's a whole bunch of YouTube videos doing exactly that. And then shining the laser through it. It's basically Stephen's stick experiment.
Wondering.
He still is, but he's in denial. He thinks he's solved it and he hasn't.
How is that? What's causing these two patterns?
So this is a proof. This is how he demonstrates I haven't, is he says I haven't. So we can't even see the argument I'm making that he's debunking. There's no argument he's allowing me to speak. So he's not allowing me to actually make the argument. And then he's saying he somehow defeated it.
Which one does which?
Oh, let me guess. You've not been doing the angled experiment, have you, that I just suggested to you? The one that you said was dopey and irrelevant. Oh, the one where you can see the 2 separate patterns.
So did you see that in there somewhere? Some justification for him saying, I've never saw that actually happen also? That I haven't had the same exact thing happen to me when I'm trying to do the double slit experiment? Oh yeah, I have.
You scummy bastard.
So now we know the center impediment decides this big pattern.
No, it doesn't.
Okay, so he just said no, it doesn't, and somehow by what proof? The number of wavelengths are the number of wavelengths. So he's saying a single impediment of a specific size can create any number of points. Any number of points, okay, that are a wavelength difference. Good luck with that.
A few months later, he finally cottoned on when I hinted and hinted and hinted. It's still wrong, still wrong, still wrong, because you pinched the stupid idea off me. I made a mistake.
Oh, whatever this is. I didn't pinch anything off of you. You stupid idiot.
When I showed the separated out angled patterns, I was wrong.
Oh, whatever. When he showed the separated out angled patterns, the only interesting video you did was, I think you had a video where there was a reflection going the other way, or was that somebody else? There was actually a double slit pattern being projected in the opposite direction. That was interesting.
Wrong when I said it was just the two patterns superimposed over each other. I was wrong, and you pinched the idea.
I never pinched any idea from Steve, so that observation, you'll never correlate that to anything Steve ever did. Okay, so that's just a preposterous lie. Preposterous lie. They'll never be correlated to any moment where, okay, this is the moment where I realized it's two patterns just superimposed. I just didn't realize it's not two slits being combined. It's not these two patterns. It's this pattern and this pattern. Ugh, pathetic.
For a few months, and then finally cottoned on, oh yeah, that's why Steve keeps going on about saying I'm still wrong. Yes, because you were still wrong, and guess what? Today you're still wrong too. You should listen to other people more.
Oh no, I should. This is a terrible waste of people's times. You're terribly sloppy. You make these bold assertions based on crappy evidence. Again, he says he has violated conservation of momentum. He's done an experiment, violated conservation of momentum, and proved that momentum isn't conserved. Okay, is everybody convinced? Do you really think if everybody just listens to you, it's going to make you right? No. It's still going to mean that you did the experiment poorly.
I don't know how to solve this yet, though. But I know when you were wrong, you moron. At least have the fucking integrity to credit other people.
You have no integrity. You credit other people for shit, okay? A guy who did a simulation where he doesn't even have the width of the slits in the experiment. He's not doing a double slit experiment mathematically. He's doing a single impediment experiment and has it labeled double slit. Right in the video that this most recent conversation, the Dr. Lincoln video says a whole bunch of crap you know to be absolutely incorrect. You didn't say a goddamn word. You have no intellectual integrity. You are such a dishonest and pathetic petty troll. That is all you are. You are obsessed with me. You envy me, whatever the fucking goddamn psychotic problem you have is. And all you can see is that red, and you can't see anything else. You're blinded by it. You lunatic. There is no consistency in your critique of falsehoods in the world. The only falsehoods you care about are the ones I speak. The only mistakes that matter to you are my mistakes. Everybody else's are excusable somehow. Everyone else can say things that are absolute horseshit, and you just mind your own business. You're an obsessive kook.
People when they give you an idea. I wanted to give it not just to you, to anybody else who wanted to. I thought your channel was a good place to put out this idea that other people could share about.
So he knows how to make a video, and so he's basically telling us right now that he had some great idea. Put it in my comment section. I deleted the comment because he's full of shit. Okay. And he's, had clearly become an adversary at this point. And I had no need to leave his fucking rubbish accusations, his lies, on my video. I have no obligation to waste my time countering your lies, especially in text. No obligation whatsoever.
The angle experiments, about the variable double slit experiments. The last thing I expected was you to try and pretend that these are your fucking ideas.
Oh, that's just such a bizarre accusation. So I guess I really will. I guess I'll go to the trouble to show all the other experiments on the internet that do two sticks. Okay, they're using the same principle. And I'll just say Steven stole it. Jesus. what a petty fuck. There's absolutely nothing, again, nothing useful you have done for me, okay, in terms of inciting any constructive thinking. You have just been in the way.
And hide the evidence by deleting my message and not bothering to read it out like you read every.
Oh, fuck you. Again, yeah, I didn't bother to read it out because I was done with you. You had declared yourself an Asperger asshole, okay, and now a full-blown troll. And I had no obligation to interact with you. You were overtly working with Hothliday to perpetrate these lies against me. Fuck you. I have no obligation to allow you to comment on my videos, you liar. You're saying all kinds of shit on your own videos and on other people's videos. Why the fuck would I leave your comments on my videos?
Else's message out. And something else. Oh yes, and the information that you said was particularly dopey and irrelevant about the slit width, how you interpret the numbers, the abbreviations, the letters that are printed on standard.
Okay, so he made a video about how hard they are to decipher, and that he had to go research it to find out how to read the numbers on the slides. So this is so ironic. And I'm saying right from the start, who cares? They're infinitesimally small slits. They're useless. That was the point I was trying to make to him, is why do I want to do the experiment with slits that aren't wide enough to get a good pattern? Why would I do that? Alright, yeah, that's right. For no good reason. It would be pointless. I don't want to do the non-opening slit experiment. I want to do the double slit experiment, which means the bigger the openings, the better. Duh.
Commercially available lamp slits, because you were getting it wrong. I've been getting it wrong. I'm sure a lot of other people get it wrong. So
okay, and I'm saying to myself, why do I care? Why do I care when they're making slits for a propaganda purpose? They're not of dimensions that are of any real use. They're making them for school classroom use to sell the propaganda of waves. So there are dimensions that destroy the pattern. They don't emphasize the pattern.
Put the information out there to say that letter means this, that means the other, and that means something else. Because you got it wrong, I got it wrong, and I thought it was useful information. It was actually useful information, but no, you didn't like it, did you? Slit center.
I didn't give a fuck, is what I said. Okay, you sent shit I didn't ask you to send. So he cut out slides too. So you know, slides like you have for a slide projector. You know, that usually have a cardboard outside. He sent them without even the cardboard, and they were cut in half. So he obviously took one half for himself and cut me a piece. Okay, so there's a little piece of film taped onto a piece of paper with a bunch of writing all over it. In Brozian writing, right? Script writing, right? So this is what he sent me. One piece of paper with crappy little pieces of slide cut out, okay, folded into an envelope. All right, now a couple of the slides did have the cardboard part, but unfortunately these slides, they should know what they should say on them. Don't use a green laser because they'll melt. So I killed the one that was the best out of them, you know, the one that had the widest slits. I wiped it out because I used a green laser. But yes, I still have them, but they're just not that useful, Steve. Sorry.
Just can't be having that. Oh, no. My mistake was to interpret one of the letters as meaning the slit the impediment with. It didn't mean that at all. It meant the slit centers.
Right, so this distance of the block dictates that, the big pattern right there.
Okay, so he's still in clips in this weird jump cutty way saying this isn't what happens, when I don't think you've established it's not what happens.
The big pattern. Note the vile tone of voice, the condescending tone of voice. He thinks he's won something.
Did you see what was in that was condescending? Can we do that again? I mean, maybe he put the wrong clip in here because I didn't get it. All right, so let's play it at regular speed because he's saying I did something. So this is like Steve Magic. He's reading some code. There's a code that I'm performing here, where this had something to do with Stephen Bro when it didn't have anything to do with Stephen Bro. But anyway,
Distance of the block dictates that, the big pattern right there.
The big pattern.
I'm saying the big. So he's finding a problem with the fact that I said the big pattern of the envelope. Like they're two distinct patterns. That's why I'm being mocking. I'm mocking the idea that why do I have to keep pointing out there's two patterns in the double slit experiment. Most people don't know that, Steve. I don't know whether you're aware of this, but because of all the liars you do endorse, the ones you say make brilliant videos and make brilliant simulations and make brilliant everything. They're so fucking brilliant. Professor Lewin is so brilliant. Do you think these people are showing you the envelope pattern? No! Oh, you're so pathetic.
Note the vile tone of voice, the condescending tone of voice.
Alright, let's play this again. It's just hilarious. I mean, he really is psychotic. So look at the stuff that's triggering him.
Like it, did you? Slit centers, can't be having that. Oh, no. My mistake was to interpret one of the letters as meaning the slit the impediment with. It didn't mean that at all. It meant the slit centers.
Right? So
Yeah, so it was basically hieroglyphics, right? So they give you a slit, and then they give you dimensions, and the dimensions aren't for actual surfaces. They're for things like the middle of the slit, the distance from the middle. So that would be, from a 0. So they're saying, they're giving you the half. Like, so if they want to give you the single impediment, they give you half of the impediment. And then you're supposed to assume, oh, there's two sides to it. Oh, okay, so it's twice that number. Oh. I mean, that kind of thing. So they say 0.5. That's all it says, 0.5. And what 0.5 really meant was 1 micron, not 0.5 of a micron.
this distance of the block dictates that the big pattern, right?
The big pattern.
Can you figure out for me the exact neural problem he has with the way I said that? how that was somehow directed to Stephen Bro? It's amazing.
Note the vile tone of voice, the condescending tone of voice. He thinks he's one.
Shouldn't everybody be condescending? That they talk about a double slit experiment and just ignore its actual features. Veritasium sits there with his two little bouncing balls in the water and shows two waves leaving when two waves can't make the pattern. You don't think anybody needs to be condescending in arguing that they're not analyzing the right pattern. You don't think anybody needs to do that.
Something tone of voice, even though he's talking utter shite, and even he would accept he's talking shite.
No, I wouldn't, so I don't even know why he would say I would. I'm quite comfortable with what I'm talking.
You know,
This pattern.
as if he's talking to 5-year-olds.
Yeah. I'm sorry. The physics being presented is wrong in so dramatic a way. Again, the Dr. Lincoln video, you're saying that was a credible explanation of the double slit experiment. Yet he never said the word envelope. And you think it's a credible video on the subject of the double slit. That's your intellectual dishonesty. It just demonstrates that you're intellectually dishonest, that your brain can't do an honest thought.
He's the 5-year-old.
This pattern.
Yeah.
So he plays it over and over again. What is the drama? What is the drama here? Was that really all that dramatic a moment? I don't remember a whole bunch of commenters saying, "God, Gary, you were incredibly insulting to the experiment." Going, this pattern. You're not allowed to talk about the pattern that way. You're so rude to poor patterns, insulting the poor pattern.
Actually, it sounds like Mr. Burns. Smithers, release the hounds.
So he can do it, but I can't do it. So he can use funny voices, but I can't use funny voices. Do you see the hypocrisy in this lunatic? He just used a silly voice, and he's complaining at me for using a silly voice. How can this make sense to anyone? How can anyone not recognize, Stephen, you've left the building, you have jumped the goldfish, you're just done, you're cooked, reboot, okay? Your operating system is infected with stupid.
I bet that's who we would like to be in secret.
Okay. And
Yes, I'd like to own a nuclear power plant. Yeah, that'd be pretty cool.
This distance, okay, between the ends of the two openings, that distance decides how big the little bricks of light.
All right, so he's saying that he's proven that's not correct. So we've changed all these path length differences. I can make any number of path length differences. I just stick something in there and I can change how many path length differences there are. I don't think you can, Steve.
Inside that pattern.
No, it doesn't. I've just shown you.
No, you haven't shown shit. So. All right.
This.
I'm just saying that, you know, from a reasonable person would now say, okay, maybe there is reason to suspect that when Steve claims he's proven something, it wasn't really a very good proof. Yeah, maybe he fucked it up.
Distance makes this. This distance makes this. The envelope. The envelope is being caused by the interior surfaces.
No, it's not. You pinched that wrong idea off me.
I didn't pinch anything off him. I mean, this is so funny. So why would you have that idea? So let's go with that. What would be your mechanical theory for that idea working? What's the wave analysis? How do you defend waves with that idea? So let's say you did have it first. How did you conceptualize it as being possible? Because it's really not, right? I mean, it's really not possible for the waves to come out of the outside opening and then the inside opening, right? Those two waves can't exist. You do understand, right? There's no physical, mechanical way those two waves could exist.
By secretly doing the angled experiments, which I told you about, and the
so we have no evidence of any of this horse shit. And obviously I had already shown, probably in my video, the fact that patterns can separate.
essays that you deleted because you're a lying scumbag.
Okay, but it's absolute horse shit. I delete it for the same reason I delete all your comments and I blocked you, is because you're an insane lying sack of shit. And I don't have an obligation to keep showing everyone your lies.
If you do the angled experiments, it will lead you to this wrong conclusion. That's how I know that you've pinched the idea, you daft.
So again, I never even talked about this angle thing, and he's saying I pinched the idea. Why wouldn't I have mentioned it then? If I thought it was that easy to do, why wouldn't I talk about it? Why wouldn't I said, look, all you have to do is put the single impediment in as an angle, and you'll cause the projection to go in a different direction. You can separate the two patterns. Why wouldn't I have made that video? Why wouldn't I have made that video?
Bastard.
The size of the bricks inside of the envelope is being dictated by the distance between these two surfaces.
So the irony is, again, just think of the irony. He's saying that when I separate the two patterns, when I combine them, and you saw the combined image, right? So the combined image was clearly they were still separated.
And again he's wrong, and again he's wrong.
So he keeps saying the same thing over and over again. Do you get that part? That he's so desperate that he has to just keep saying it over and over again, even though he didn't show it. He really didn't.
No, it's not. Logically, yes, I understand why you think that. Because if that was a single slit, that would be the case. The problem is, the minute you put an impediment...
Okay, well, it doesn't change the... Again, show me how it can mathematically work then. How is it mathematically possible to create more points where there's a wavelength of difference? Show me how it could make any sense to create more of those. Where would they get shoved in? How does it move them? Well, there won't be any explanation.
in the middle of that, you only have to put a hair in the middle of that, and it magnifies that pattern that supposedly the outside surface is made. How come the impediment changed?
It magnify it. So he just said magnify. So this is the question, right? Is he measuring the again? We already know that the nodes change size. So again, is he measuring their absolute existence, or again he's doing his per meter thing? So he just counted 17 and he made it look like that was 170, right? So we already see that part of the catch. So the catch is that there's going to be a total, okay, of possible points. Does the total change, or do you just change how many is in this section? And there's, if there's more in here, then there's less in here. And that the total number of possible places where it's possible to have a wavelength of difference can't change. Now, if you're saying it can, that's a dramatic statement. So you're saying I can have two surfaces and I can change the absolute number of places where there's a wavelength of difference. I challenge that as being possible. You making bad measurements possible.
This is it as well then. How come the impediment changes it as well then? If the outside surfaces.
Let's just re-speed this up, because this is just all redundant now. He's just going to keep saying the same shit over and over and over again.
Is all that dictates it. You moron.
There, done, equals truth.
There, done, you have been. If I'd planned this as a trick against you, I couldn't have done it better. If I'd planted something for you to pinch, I couldn't have done it better. For you to pinch.
Just amazing, right? So his two-stick experiment, which he thinks is original, which isn't, proves the point quite obviously that it's just about the surfaces. I mean, he's basically showing that it's not about openings, it's about surfaces, because the sticks create exactly the same surfaces and exactly the same positions as the double opening experiment. And so it's really just about surfaces in specific orientation to each other. So he's proving that point in one video, and then he's denying its existence in the next. Ha 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 ha!
An idea that's wrong, that's flawed, when really I was just trying to share it with everybody, including you. I was trying to be nice.
Isn't it a little bit disgusting, though, when people can say you stole something and they don't have to have any evidence that you stole it? They don't have to provide a single shred of evidence. I mean, I swear on everything valuable in the universe to me, every kitten, every human, every anything. I did not steal any idea from Stephen Bro. That never happened. Okay? It just didn't happen. This is all in his imagination, and he makes these assertions when he can't produce any evidence. Even if he had stated it in his comment. Well, there's this, I was able to separate out the pattern, so I'd have to see that from his comment, right? So his comment would have to have something in it where he actually described that effect that we saw. It's not that easy to describe, right? I separated out the pattern. I mean, that would sound, well, what are you talking about? And somehow from that comment, I saw that there's two patterns and they're just single slit patterns superimposed on top of each other. And I didn't immediately make a video about it. I waited, for a year, maybe more, and then started talking about the two outside surfaces and two inside surfaces. So that's supposed to be his evidence that he's caught me in some kind of bullshit, when clearly I could make the argument he can't produce any evidence, because I know it didn't happen, Steve. I know I might have not even read your fucking comment because I was already done with you. Okay, so this is a delusion of yours. It has nothing to do with reality.
They look, try this, try that, try the other, because these give certain results, and I came to the wrong conclusion. And hey, Pastor, you just had to delete the message, say it was open and relevant, never read it out, never let anybody see it, get rid of it, and then claim, hey, look what I...
You're a troll. And I got rid of your comment because you were already conspiring against me. You were already an enemy, asshole. So again, and could you, let's just, everybody be realistic, right? Imagine if somebody like Stephen Bro was commenting on your videos, and you have other things to do, and he writes these insanely long comments. Are you going to say you're going to read all of them? Come on. Be honest. No, you're going to say, oh fuck, it's just more Steve shit.
Discovered, but you discovered something I discovered and showed you, and was actually wrong. That's why.
So he didn't show me anything. So let's understand. There's no evidence he showed anything or any of that happened. Blah 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 blah.
Oh, you were wrong now in this video. It might take you another 3 frigging months to cotton on after I hinted and hinted and hinted. You're still wrong, Harry. You made a mistake. You pinched a car with no engine. Let me tell you where the engine.
Whatever. You're not going to be able to tell us where. You're not going to be able to explain your proof. You're not going to be able to explain why it's happening, how it's happening. You're not going to explain a single thing about it. So you're going to just say it happens, and you're not going to prove it. And you're not going to prove it with anything called really convincing evidence. Your evidence sucks, Steve. I'm sorry. You think it's great, it sucks.
It is.
I counted 17 things, and then I called it 170 per meter. You know, extrapolate the numbers into bigger numbers to make it look like more.
You're still wrong 18 months later, because you're still not cottoning on to the fact that the impediment does affect the result of the outside surfaces. The outside surface.
So he keeps saying it. Okay, fine. Until you come up with a better proof, though, I'm not buying it. So keep selling it, but I'm not buying it. And it won't change the absolute number. The only thing we've established is that there's variance in the size of the nodes. They vary. And they vary based on some sort of relationship to the geometry. Now, what that relationship is, I don't know. Nobody's suggesting anything yet. But there is a difference. They're closer together at the top and further away at the 90 degrees. And by what proportion? That would be the thing to do. So I would argue that they're always the same. So we should just mathematically figure it out. From the people who know how to do the math, just do a slit of one wavelength, then do a slit of 2 wavelengths, then do a slit of 3 wavelengths, then do a slit of 4 wavelengths, and just tell us where the first maxima is, what degrees. There's a degree number that changes. It gets closer and closer together. The wider you make the slit, the closer and closer the little bars get to each other. Where the first maxima is, technically. Because it's not in the center, by the way. Which I thought this video might be about, and it's not. So we'll have to wait for the next video for that. But let's see if we can just zoom through the rest of this. Because he's not saying anything, right? He's just celebrating his proof. So instead of spending this time showing us better images of things, he's just celebrating that he proved it.
Do not totally dictate those small fringes. The impediment also affects them. And you've gone down this rabbit hole all because you wanted the most simplistic answer possible. You couldn't stand any complication because your brain couldn't handle it. Unfortunately, nature is more complicated than that. The answer isn't simple. People who go around saying it's simple tend to be simpletons. It's not simple.
Period.
Okay, so he's just arguing from magical theory. You know, it's magical. You can't do it simple. There's no simple mechanism. The universe is in a simple place. It's magical place. So he's just making the argument from magic. Okay, we need the magic. And that's all he's really saying there. There's absolutely no reason for an intelligent, logical person to say evolution isn't simple. The fundamental, elemental mechanisms is insanely simple. Now, obviously, the genetic code is insanely complex. But the mechanism is insanely simple. You know, success, failure, trial and error, survival of whoever survives. Tools.
Drop the mic, drop the chalk, or pretentious prick.
And if you think about what I just said,
Oh yes, master, do tell. And yeah, I'm thinking about it, alright, because it all sounds very familiar. Very good.
Yeah, quote mining. So again, they can't play an honest clip of a video. They just can't do it. And imagine if I wasted my time with that. You don't think I can pull fodder out of this shit video this asshole just made and put a bunch of shit clips together? Yeah, I can. But I would never be as slimy and low a person to do it. Just as I don't waste my time photoshopping either.
Reason.
you'll realize it's 4 surfaces. And it just depends on the distance between the 4 surfaces. And what are the 4 surfaces? They're 4 point sources.
Well, that's not strictly true. How can a surface be a point source? A table is a surface, but it's not a point source. Does it tell me where on the table I'm supposed to be considering
The point source is the edge of the table, yeah. I'm sorry, it's a legitimate statement to call it a point source in the sense that all the vectors come from the finished edge of the surface, idiot. The ball bearing rolls across the surface, but when it gets to the edge, it flies off, idiot. The edge is the point source. Durr.
the point source as an area?
4 sources of photon. You represent the phase, it just notches on a line. And then you can just show how the longer line has notches in a different position. And you're just looking to line up the notches. That's it. Mechanism provided.
Yeah, mechanism provided by somebody else. I remember somebody suggesting this to you in the comments. Well, it's quite ironic.
All right, so he keeps lying. Okay, show this comment where you said the double slit pattern is just the outside surfaces and the inside surfaces imposed on two single slit experiments just posed on top of each other. So just show, you said you keep everything, show the comment. Oh, that's right, you'll just reconstruct the comment. I mean, it's just so obvious. I mean, we can just go back in time in my videos and we can show the video where I first said it. And is that the day after Steve said it? No. So we know this is horse shit, this accusation that Steve said it first. Bullshit. I mean, even if Steve said it first, that has something to do with why I drew that conclusion. And understand what the only part of the conclusion, what my eureka moment, okay, as I've pointed out, was just doing one simple thing, right? Superimposing two single slit experiments, right, where you have dot, 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 and you have dot, 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 dot. Superimposing them, that is putting them next to each other and saying they would cast on top of each other, you would just get this line would be right next, 1 millimeter away from this line, and then this line would be 1 millimeter away from this line, and this line would be 1 millimeter away from this line, right? So you wouldn't get anything. That was my initial mistake. I was doing the two wave thing in the sense I was thinking about two patterns being superimposed and realizing that they're only a millimeter apart, so they're just going to be superimposed on top of each other. So that can't create the pattern. And it wasn't until I realized that what's really changing is this dimension and this dimension. And if you just take those two slit experiments, those two different single slit experiments, well, then you have a gigantic open single slit and you have a very narrow small single impediment, and that's why those two combined works. Anyway, just continuing.
That you've never actually done it, because if you had, you wouldn't have been repeating the wrong assertion all these months, that makes the fringes equal as they spread around the curved surface. It doesn't. They get wider and wider and wider the further out you go. You didn't know that because you've not bothered to actually do this notch.
No, so he didn't arrive at that conclusion by doing the experiment. So let's understand, he never saw the fringes getting bigger and said, oh, they're obviously getting bigger. So we know that's not how he realized that they changed size. He realized they changed size because he saw other people modeling it that way. Period. Not because he ever personally observed it by doing the experiment. So again, another nonsensical argument by Steve, saying you need to do the experiment because if you do it, you can see it. You don't see that part. The fact is you can't see the pattern getting substantially wider and wider. All right? You can't. Okay, you can see some indication of it. Like I said, I always blamed it on the flat screen. But the flat screen isn't what's really causing it, because the projection happens right at the source. The fact that you get these different size nodes is a fact of the angles. The angles are creating it, not the source angles are creating it. The hypotenuse argument. The hypotenuse isn't growing at the same rate as the side that's expanding. So as the side expands, the hypotenuse doesn't grow at this proportional rate. So if I was to take a side and I was just going to make the side longer and longer, this relationship isn't proportional. The 25% doubled doesn't give you 50%. The size of the increments is changing as you're going, so it's not proportional to each other. It matters more. The hypotenuse is growing more when you're doing this than when you're doing this.
On a string thing that somebody else suggested to you in comments.
But these people are just such scum.
You're just transferring your own thought.
So just more, what is this? I'm just saying that anybody who's interested in the science and the truth, do you really think Steve, do you really think they're interested in this little bullshit of pulling clips out of my videos saying people suck?
It's about yourself, not other people. You know deep down that you're scum.
I mean, to insult my integrity.
What fucking integrity is that?
You're pretending your math is perfect.
Yeah, I'm not a liar, like you. You lie about every fucking thing you talk about. You're a fucking compulsive fucking liar.
When it doesn't get the right answer.
Right back at you, Gary. Pretending your math is perfect when it doesn't get the right answer.
Well, I was wrong about them being equidistant, okay? So we've established that the nodes can't be called nodes really because they change size. But it doesn't change the number of them. And that's the part that was important to my argument, is that the number is directly related to the number of wavelengths in the distance.
You don't even do any fucking math, you just pretend you've done it.
And the reason why we don't draw it is because if we draw it, you'd watch us changing the experiment. You'd watch us putting the wave somewhere it can't be.
And even that's an
So totally out of context, but obviously that's the argument where if you make it 4 waves, okay, they're in preposterously stupid locations that waves wouldn't be created in.
entirely separate mistake that you've been making. Well, I don't know if it's a mistake or an intentional deception. It's a bit hard to tell whether you're thick or a liar. I'm never quite sure. Because you keep talking about the wave centers being here or the wave centers being there. There's no bloody...
Yeah, all the math is dependent on a center, a focus. So I don't even know how you can be making any kind of argument where you think it doesn't have a focus. That the sources are at a focus. I don't even know how... Again, you're just debunking all of traditional interpretation. The Young drawing has 2 focuses in it, in the center of the slits. That's the distance in Young's math. That's why Young's math doesn't work. Oh, God, you're stupid.
thing as the wave centers in this context, because you should know darn well that they're drawing electromagnetic radiation, electromagnetic waves, as if they were water waves, because...
It doesn't matter. Water waves also have vectors in them. You can draw water waves as vectors where they collide, where they're opposite. You can draw the vectors, and you'll draw them from point sources, wave centers. Waves have a center, Steve. You know, the thing is waving. I just draw it over here, yeah. It's waving. The wave has a center, Steve. It's a real concept, the center.
Drawing it as if they were water waves makes it easier to draw, easier to interpret where the constructive and destructive interference is. You cannot practically draw electromagnetic waves.
It wouldn't matter. They're saying it's the same thing. The distances are the same. The way it functions is the same. It puts force in the same locations. So why would it matter whether it's electromagnetic or not? So why don't you give us your electromagnetic wave theory? Why don't you explain what electromagnetic even is? What's the electro part and what's the magno part?
The way they are meant to be drawn, if you were doing them literally, you have to take a shortcut. You have to draw them for practical reasons, as if they were water waves. But nobody in their right mind thinks that electromagnetic radiation are like water waves. They draw.
Okay, there's lots of people who actually do. So, so he's saying Franklin Who is out of his mind because he doesn't realize that it's this wobbly shit, snaking through the world. It's snaking. Yeah.
Draw them that way for convenience, so that you can interpret them, so that they can draw them.
So again, there's no theory to back any of this crap up, okay? And again, he's just arguing with the conventional interpretation, pretending they didn't mean to do it that way. It's the only choice they had, because they couldn't draw it as a snake.
You can't draw electromagnetic waves the way they are meant to be drawn if you wanted to depict them accurately.
It's force. If all you're doing is depicting them as a force, and there's a point where the force is plus or the force is minus, the real things that actually physically happen, and those are the significant things. So of course you can draw an oscillating current by just drawing it as a wave where there's the plus part and then there's a nothing, the minus part, and then a plus part and a minus part. You can do that. And you can even do it with the two-phased electricity.
You couldn't do it. Nobody can, really. And dare say you get a computer program to do it very accurately. But on a chalkboard, nobody can do it because it's very, very difficult.
I don't know. So who even knows what he's talking about here? There's nothing difficult. The point is you can't make 2 sources create 2 patterns. Young's drawing is a pile of shit. It will never get the right answer for the double slit. It's a pile of shit.
But it's easy to draw a few arcs and say, well, that's not electromagnetic radiation, but it gives you the same answer. It's a shortcut, Gary, and you abuse that shortcut.
Where's the example of me abusing anything? I'm drawing scattering vectors because I don't believe in lights going everywhere in the universe right now. That the photon my eye is receiving is also going there and there and there and there. It's the same photon went everywhere, but I somehow collapsed it here. Bullshit I did. Do you believe in waves or some other thing? Do you believe a photon is going as a polarization in a localized hunk of space? Well, then that's a waveton. That's not a wave, because waves spread, idiot. They go everywhere. The wave front. So how are you even making any sense anyway, you idiot?
Pretending you don't think it's a shortcut, pretending you think that everybody is claiming that electromagnetic radiation does that exact same thing as water waves. There are no slit centers. You're deliberately, well, I think, I'm not sure.
No, you're the one, your team is the one deliberately deceiving. Puro putting the water wave example where he had all kinds of noise in the signal and then put it through the slit. So noise created noise. Oh, big, like, what a surprise. Completely dishonest experiment, right? It's like doing single waves where I jiggle the single object so fast that the waves bump into each other, and then I create a messy signal, and then I call that wave interference. There, single slits create interference. When no, they don't, if you do them at the capacity of the system. So obviously you can fuck water up, you can create noise in water because it's moving at a much slower speed. But you can't fool nature in the sense of the scale of the universe. You can't do that. Yeah, you're not going to be able to create that fake noise. All right.
You are telling people the wrong thing by saying, and here are the slit centers. There are no slit centers. Electromagnetic radiation goes like that. It's more like a ray. And you can't say, well, that's the center of the ray. Well, it would be meaningless.
Okay, then their theory is wrong. So why aren't you correcting them? Because that's not their theory, Steve. It's not Richard Feynman's theory. It's not it's not Professor Lewin's theory. So why aren't you correcting them? Oh.
The rays could be all across the width of the slit. It doesn't go down the center. It's not like a water wave, which does have a center, as if you dropped a pebble in a pool. That would be the wave center. Anyway, you're either getting this or you're not.
No, I have no need to get it because it doesn't mathematically make any sense anyway. The point is you're saying that each ray goes into the slit and randomly goes in a direction because you can't tie it to any kind of event. So there's point sources across the entire opening, and each ray goes randomly in some wacky direction. That's your theory. Show how that creates the pattern, because it doesn't. That's just the two-wave theory. Show how this squiggly is going in a random direction from two openings, okay, creates two patterns. You won't be able to show it, because it won't work.
Probably not.
You have to create two waves that essentially have two different frequencies. Will he admit the truth? I hate this fucking planet of assholes and liars and scum.
Hey, that's right, it's the idea of me, haven't you? We're talking about these angled experiments where you can separate out the two patterns, and that's how we came to the wrong conclusion.
Oh, so it's just a lie. Sorry, you have no proof of that, Stephen. You're just making an accusation based on circumstance. Okay, and saying, I have all this circumstantial evidence. I wrote a comment he deleted, therefore he took my idea. When you don't even have evidence I read your comment, let alone that I stole your idea. Yeah, you're just saying it. And, I call that being a slandering asshole, frankly. When you say stuff you really can't prove. When I convict people of crimes, when I really haven't seen them do it, I find some litter on the street and I say, oh yeah, that's probably that fucker over there. But I really don't know that he did it. I'm not being a nice guy. That's being a shithead. And you're being a shithead to think you have any evidence whatsoever to correlate those two events. And to say there's a clear correlation between me realizing that the outside surfaces are creating the small bar pattern because of your comment. You have no evidence that that's true.
Conclusion? Yeah, I've explained about that. And he obviously did that at home and came to the wrong conclusion.
So he obviously didn't show me that. He obviously didn't do that. You can't say, oh there, see, we're showing how it's just two patterns superimposed.
I did at the time. The double slit pattern isn't really interference at all, it's just two patterns superimposed. Because I've explained about the angled pattern. You can deny that all you want, but I still have a record of the comment. So there we go.
Well, where is the record? Please, provide the record. All right? I don't know what record there will be, but whatever. You have a screenshot of the comment? Because I'm not going to let you retype it, frankly. No, that's not going to be allowed. But what record do you have that on the date you published it? So give me the date that you published it, and let me watch the videos that preceded that date. And we'll see if those videos, if there's some indication that I just had a huge, giant realization because of Stephen Bro. So give me the exact date you published this moronic comment that I deleted, that you say provided me with the insight. And you're now saying it wasn't correct anyway, but let's just say.
I think I'm going to have to shut it down now. I think we've come to the bitter end, really. I've run out of camera time. Had a bit of fun.
And this distance is deciding this size. All right? Game over. All right? It's understood now. You can't fool me or the people watching this video anymore with this dodge. We now know what surface is causing what effect. We know if I do a single slit at this distance, I'll get this size block.
So even if I was wrong, and this correlation isn't perfect, okay, let's say it was a little bit, the fact is it's really close. There's a really close correlation between these distances and that effect, right? I mean, I changed the thickness of the internal impediment. I changed the thickness of the envelope. That is, the smaller I make the distance, the bigger the envelope pattern gets, the wider it gets. And there's a clear correlation between the outside surfaces, and the further away they get from each other, the more little bars there are. Now, Steve's saying it's not an exact correlation, and that's all he's saying, really. But they're still hugely correlated.
So the game is over.
But this is not true.
But the bottom pattern was created by a central impediment that was exactly the same size as the opening of the top pattern. You agree with that, correct? You're not disputing that, are you? Fucking not. And so you are pretending there's some argument about the pattern size. You fucking liar. You do the fucking...
Okay, so he has me reading a different comment, I guess, right? This isn't the comment that is somehow the one he's griping about. So let's play this. Sorry, this is going on and on a bit. I didn't realize it would take me quite this long. But everything he says is horseshit, and you have to respond to it because it's a lie and another lie and another lie and another lie.
The bottom pattern was created by a central impediment that was exactly the same size as the opening of the top pattern. You agree with that, correct? You're not disputing that, are you? Fucking not. And so you are pretending there's some arguing about the pattern size. You fucking liar. Do the fucking test at home. So again, just idiotic. We know now that all I do is move the outside surfaces in and out, and I'll change how many little blobs of light are.
Okay, that's the Professor Lewin. So we already know from the variable slit that all I do is, as I'm bringing the slits closer and closer together, the pattern gets wider and wider and wider. So that's all I'm saying here. So hardly a disputable argument that we know the correlation between the distance between the surface is correlated exactly to the dimensions of how many nodes you're going to have, how many will fit in the experiment.
Showing.
And 18 months later, you still haven't realised that you only have to move the inside surfaces in and out, and that will also change those little...
Okay, so he's saying it, and yet we have no real good evidence of it, right? We know that what he showed in this video is not good enough evidence for him to say I can change the tiny bars by moving the inside bars. So that's basically what he's saying now, even though his experiment didn't do that. All right, that's not what his variable slit did. He didn't put a single impediment in and then vary the outside surfaces. That he could do, but he didn't do that one. He just put a different size object in, put a hair in, and then put something else in, and then said, look how much the little bars change size. And again, we saw how poor the quality was. And we also saw that they were still hugely correlated. And that the real numbers were 17 and 19. Those kind of numbers. Still hugely correlated.
Blobs of light, as you were calling them. It's not just the outside surfaces that change those little patterns. It's not just the outside surfaces which change.
He's just repeating himself, right? So, and on purpose, he took his own clip to do the same thing so he could make himself say the same shit over and over again as if he knows it now. It has been well established. So I just let the viewer make their own judgment about how reliable Steve is. You saw his evidence. Is it enough evidence for everybody to draw a conclusion? I don't think so.
Those little patterns. It's the inside surfaces which also changes those little patterns. It's not as simple as you want it to be. I'm sorry.
They'll be stuck in the same bigger pattern because I'm not changing the surfaces in the center.
So just understand that what he's actually challenging also is the whole theory of what causes the path length difference. So he's saying I can create more points where there's a wavelength of difference. I can create more of them by, somehow I change how big the outside dimensions are by changing how big the impediment is. And I'm just saying that intuitively you've got to realize, well, that's a pretty bold statement, Steve, so you better have pretty good evidence. And did he provide that? No. Just like he's overturned the idea of conservation of kinetic energy. So even though Professor Lewin overtly says in his video, you can fuck with kinetic energy, but nature can't fuck with kinetic energy, clearly stating you can't not conserve kinetic energy. Did he post a comment to Professor Lewin saying, I've proved you wrong? No. So how is this an honest person? He's debunking conventional physics, and yet he won't let them know he's debunked them.
I can do is move the two outside slits, and I can make 3 dots, 6 dots, 10 dots, 20 dots.
And you've even got that wrong, because if you're on about the central maxima, you cannot have an even number of dots in it. 3 dots, yes. 6 dots, no. 10 dots, 20.
So as he already illustrated, the number that are in that node is variable to what you can see. So in the one image of this double slit he showed, you could actually see that the dots were all still there. Right? So there was no, maxima node that you could actually say, here's the beginning of it and here's the ending of it. But anyway, it doesn't really matter. What you need with all these experiments too is a very precise drawing of the center. You have to have a very precise center and then start realizing that the game really starts with the first straight line from the surface. So as I originally drew in the first part of this video, you have to separate the two pies by the 1 millimeter or the half millimeter of the experiment. So you have to keep those separate, because that zone in the middle isn't part of the experiment really, because now you're changing your path length different. You're changing the length of your measuring device, the control. You can't change the control distance, the L. But anyway.
That's whatever you said. No, they have to be an odd number. 3, 5, 7, 9, 11. That's how many.
Right. So I've already talked about that subject. I actually said in a video, I don't know if there's a standard, right? I actually said it in a video where I actually pointed out that maybe it's just all odd numbers, maybe it's even numbers. I speculated to that very thing. Now, yeah, I don't think it's a terribly significant whether it's even or odd, but I pointed it already out that that's an open question, whether only odd numbers show up in the double maxima.
And you get in the central maxima.
I just changed.
So let's figure it out. We know it's twice as many as in the other nodes. So you could write there from a starting point, you could say if it's 7 and 7, that would be 14. If it's 8 and 8, that would be 16. Yeah, so it doesn't matter. You can never evade a positive, right?
The outside slits. Predict the pattern before you even see it. So will I. So more implication that somehow, oh, my theory doesn't work because I don't know that these two outside surfaces are dictating the size of those little blocks. Well, yeah, I do know that, asshole.
But you don't seem to know that the inside surfaces also changes the width.
So let's understand, it doesn't change it by anything called a meaningful amount. Now, he was claiming twice as big, right? So, I mean, he's claiming 50. Well, I can't remember what his most dramatic difference was. Right, it was 180 versus 140. So 18 versus 14. That was his most dramatic comparison, I think. Okay, in terms of the change in the node size. But anyway, all horribly measured.
To those little dots, the little fringes. But you don't seem to know that the inside surfaces all...
So he keeps saying the same thing over and over again. So I don't know it, and I certainly haven't acquired evidence of it from conventional physics, so you won't show me any links demonstrating any of this stuff, of course. And so all we have is the little tiny portion of this video, the 30 seconds of this video, where you actually show something. Alright, and what you showed is of varying quality, all kinds of different quality. 1 minute's clear, next minute's blurry, who knows. So, yeah, fuck you.
Also alters the width of those little fringes. Why don't you know that, Gary? Because you've jumped to conclusions. that only the outside surfaces affects the width of.
Okay, so he just keeps saying it over and over and over, and all we have is Steve's word for it. And I'm supposed to say, yes, I trust Steve. He does such perfect, clean experiments. They're beautifully precise. I trust him implicitly. No, I don't. Alright, enough. I'm not even going to play the last second because it just... it's just too much. Over and over and over and over. This broken record. Bullshit. Yuck. So... anyway, this has been a DraftScience video presentation. I will try to get to his next video. So anyway, that one probably is going to be on the varying size of the nodes, I would imagine. But who the fuck knows? Somebody told me he plays clips from my 2-slit video, you know, the one I'm trying to get him to play through. The 17-minute video he won't play through. Okay, but anyway, doesn't matter. Till the next time and such. 2 hours and 20 minutes. That's disgusting. Ugh.